Hi, I'm Leo from My Bubba, and I'm sitting here with Richard, who is the CEO of SafeToNet. It's going to be a really interesting piece. We're talking a lot about internet safety for children, and I've been doing a lot of research, and you're obviously the man to speak to. So hopefully this is going to be a really informative piece for lots of people out there. I've asked lots of our followers to write in, call in, email, tell us questions they've had. And one thing that I got literally 5 minutes ago, I've got reams of things, but someone just said it's the biggest challenge facing our generation as parents. Pretty terrifying thought, but she's right. So really, I'd love you to go back to grassroots. Tell us, why did you start this company?
Thank you. I'm a dad, and a dad, albeit of I can't believe I'm saying this now, a 29-year-old.
Wow.
And I know, whew, thank you. And a 24-year-old. But when I started working on this about 5-6 years ago, I have a background in behavioural analytics and running technology companies, and I'd done okay. I'd started a few and sold a few, and so I became a private investor. And I was asked to invest in a social network. Now, look at me, I'm older than Moses. So I started doing my due diligence, and I saw all this horrendous abuse, aggression, the hardcore pornography, just really, really unpleasant stuff. And I just couldn't understand it. But fundamentally, I fell into the same trap that, quite frankly, I think we all fall into, and that is that Facebook, Google, Snapchat, Twitter, they couldn't fix it. So if they can't fix it, then
who can?
Nobody can fix it. So I sort of let it go a bit. But because I have a background in behavioural analytics, it just seemed to me that you can pattern a predator. You can determine exactly what they're doing because it's a sort of well-trodden path, and actually it's relatively easy to teach computers how to look for predatory behaviour patterns, as well as to look at behavioural patterns as you and I. Now we know that happens because that's how we get advertised to on Facebook and so on. They've worked out exactly who we are, what we like and what we don't like. So it's a similar sort of concept. So I then became incensed, utterly incensed, because I've got kids, and they were in that grunt speak mode, and they had their head down, and I couldn't really communicate with them, and I didn't know what they were looking at.
Was this age of an iPhone?
iPhone, yes, it was. So this was 2013. So it's really not that long ago, in truth. So the iPhone had been around since 2004. So we're quite a few years into it. And I just became incensed when I realised actually it is possible to do something about this, and my kids are in trouble because I don't know who they're speaking to, I don't know what they're saying, I don't know what they're seeing, I don't know what they're hearing, and I don't really understand the world that they now live in. So that was the motivation.
Fantastic. Scary, but fantastic. You've kind of answered this question, but what are your main concerns when it comes to kids and the internet? If you could sort of scale your worst case scenario, what was your main sort of...
So at the age my children were and had been through their sort of early teens to mid-teens, there's a primal issue that goes on these social networks, and that's sexting. And so I was really concerned that they could do something out of just sheer naivety and maybe primal instinct and send an image that was inappropriate. Now, I think most of us would know that those images don't necessarily stay where you've sent them, and they get distributed around the world, and before you know it, your child is being shamed for doing something just out of sheer naivety. And it's a horrendous thought to know that could be going on in my home without me understanding it. And bearing in mind, we all see our home as our castle, as a place where we're all secure.
Safe haven.
Safe haven, exactly that. So I was really concerned about that. But my job, the good and the bad of my job, the good is that I only exist to keep children safe online. But to evidence that my software does what I say it does, I have to see some of the most appalling things.
Yeah, I bet.
So I've seen a 10-year-old girl hang herself online. And that isn't in some third world country that you've never heard of, that's in this country. And you have to ask yourself, why did she even film herself online, killing herself? And that's because of all the notoriety and the likes and the fame that kids want. And they want instant fame online, and they believe they're capable of getting it. And that therefore means they end up making tons of mistakes because of the naivety of youth. So
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, really, really terrifying, yeah.
So really self-harm is one of the, obviously sexting,
Yes.
but
Yes,
ultimately things that could
that's where it leads
happen.
to. Yes, that's right.
And these threats that you can detect, how can you? I'd love to talk a bit about your app and how it works and how you can detect them.
So mum and dad download the app onto their device, and they set up the accounts for their children, and then they load it onto their child's device. And this is all based upon a permission sort of process. So the child has to really be engaged with this and understand what's going on. And what's fundamentally crucial to what we do at SafeToNet is that the software doesn't snoop or spy or pry. So we respect absolutely the child's rights to privacy, and it's a fundamentally important tenet to everything that we do.
What sort of age from? For instance, my son's not even 10 yet, and I would probably, after speaking to you, want to download this, and I probably wouldn't talk to him about it. Or do you think that's something you should?
No, I think you should. I fundamentally think you should at any age. And the earlier you do it, without droning on, Mum, come on, but just saying what the software is designed to do. And the crucial thing, it's designed to keep them safe. And as a result of that, liberate them so that they can do things without you being on
Breathing
their back.
down their neck.
And that's the key to it.
Yeah.
Is this allows mum and dad to get off the kid's back. So you download it onto your child's phone, and essentially what it does is it installs an intelligent keyboard onto their device. Looks just like the same as all the other keyboards that they might use. And then it's looking for their patterns of behaviour, and it does that.
And sorry, it's actually on, so it wouldn't be something that sits on it, it's actually within.
No, it's within the kit. So you know how keyboards pop up?
Absolutely, so it's the same thing. It's not something you'd have to...
No, that's right. No, it's embedded on the device.
Great.
And so what it does, as the child is typing, it's working out the chances of them ending up in a spot of trouble. So phase one of the safeguarding journey is to try and advise and guide them in real time to go away from risk. So as they may be typing something that could be inappropriate, the keyboard will change colour, it will glow red. And the idea is it's this whole you're being watched style stuff, but it's all happening automatically. No human being is seeing what they're typing other than, of course, the child themselves. So it changes colour, but if they persist, it will then frustrate the message that they're trying to send. So it will remove the words and it won't let them send it in the first place. And the reason why that's so important is it's all designed to stop your child from messing up in the first place. Now, I can vaguely remember what I was like as a boy, and goodness me, if I'd had this sort of technology in my hand, I know I'd have ended up in a ton of trouble.
Yeah.
And we instinctively as parents know, if I asked you, do you think your son is capable of making a mistake? Well, yeah, absolutely is.
Absolutely.
And that's
especially
what this
if you give them, you're giving them the apple and saying, taste it.
Absolutely right. And of course, in today's world now, newborn babies, firstly, you can buy a pram with an iPad bracket.
It's just terrifying.
The tablet, the phone, the iPad is the modern day equivalent of a dummy.
Of course
and
it is.
So parents, we understand why you give them to your kids, because actually you want to keep them occupied whilst you're busy dealing with all the challenges that we all face with.
And you think it's an educational app, it's fantastic. I mean, when your child is born now in hospital, you can bet your bottom dollar that there are 2 or 3 Apple or similar products less than 2 meters away from their head.
Totally. Now, if I was to tell you, and I'm not here to spread fear, uncertainty and doubt, but if I was to tell you that if you put your kids on YouTube for Kids, until recently there was Peppa Pig, and Peppa Pig took a knife and she slit her throat. Now, you don't know as a mum that's what your child is looking at, but they are.
And subconsciously your 2-year-old's just seen that.
Just seen it. So just imagine.
How does that happen? And how does YouTube not stop that, or the devices themselves? How can that be on our screens?
So, well, that's a very interesting question, and I'll give you a controversial answer.
Please.
Do I think they could filter it? 100%. I know they could filter it, because SafeToNet can.
At a great expense?
Not at a great expense. Now, we've spent quite a number of millions building this technology. It isn't easy.
But for big companies like that, it's nothing.
They can afford to employ the greatest talent coming out of Stanford, and pay the highest salaries, where young companies like ours, that's a very difficult thing to do. So the answer to that, if I tell you that Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO and founder of Facebook, in late 2017, in their financial reports, they recognised, these are their words, not mine, they recognised they had over 270 million undesirable users on Facebook. That's more than 1 in 10. More than 1 in 10 users on Facebook are, in quotes, undesirable. Now, the average child has over 300 friends and followers. So statistically, 30 of them are not who they say they are. And this all comes down, quite frankly, to money. So,
yes, so why are they not doing anything?
So the 270 million undesirable users on Facebook, to their shareholders, they're each worth $250. That's a $67 billion asset.
So it all comes back to money, as it always does.
Always does. Always does.
I had this debate with my husband last night, and he said, you can't just call out YouTube and Google and Facebook. You've got to talk about these people who are putting these devices out as well, whether it was Amazon with Alexa or the iPad, Apple with the iPad. They have something to answer for. I mean, if not everything to answer for. Why are they not doing anything?
So I think the answer, your husband's right. The answer is even broader than that. We actually all have a responsibility.
Of course.
So where do you buy your phone from in the first place? You go down to the high street into a telco shop, and you buy that first smartphone for your child as they're maybe about to go to secondary school or whatever. At that point in time, that telco should not sell you the phone unless it's got safeguarding software on it.
Absolutely.
And you shouldn't buy it unless it's got it on it. No, you wouldn't get into a car now and put your kids in the back of the car and not put their seatbelt on.
No, of course.
I come from an era where actually you didn't have seatbelts in cars.
I know, but cars weren't as fast, and it's...
Well, they could still kill people, couldn't
I
they?
agree with that, but I think as you move forward, you have to start safeguarding, especially when you're talking about our children.
You
I
do.
suppose you're saying the same thing.
I am, because we're living in a social experiment. None of us know how to get out of it. And so until somebody... we've got to stop talking about it. Stop saying to parents, just go and talk to your kids and all will be fine.
It doesn't help. That's what's driving me insane.
Yeah, they won't listen, and even if they do, the temptation is huge. 2 buttons and you've entered a world that you love. And I think that...
But your children's friends are talking about on the playground.
Totally. And don't go and switch their device off, because their real life is actually online. And I know this is very hard for parents to appreciate, but that is what is happening. The real life of a child now is not snuggling up with mum and dad on the sofa on a Saturday night watching telly. It's actually being online. It's socialising with my mates. It's listening to the same music.
That's terrifying on its own, but that's the way. So go ahead and turn these things off, and what happens?
Well, they get bullied at school. They get excluded from school. They get left out. They get spoken about. And so actually their self-confidence is wrecked. And it is just not a sensible thing to do, to just take the device off the child, whether you do it virtually using parental control software or physically.
Which I don't know what that means anyway.
Right. The thing is that we as parents have to understand the consequence of disconnecting our child from their real life. We have to accept, I know it's hard, but we have to accept that so much of their life is spent online. And actually, it's a wonderful thing if you think about it, because let's imagine we could all surf the net, we could all interact without fear of molestation or predation. Imagine that. Kids today can learn so much more than I could ever have learned.
I understand that, but then I go back to a holiday I had at Christmas. We were in a really lovely hot country, beautiful hotel, and I turned a corner and there were about 6 or 7 adorable young kids, all sitting on their smartphones. They must have been young teenagers, like 13, 14, 15. They looked so miserable. They were hunched over, tapping away on their thing. Outside, people were surfing, they were sunbathing, they were going on dolphin, whale watching, whatever it might be. And these kids were looking so down, tapping away, probably talking to the person next to them. Mm-hmm. We've got... How do you tackle that?
So it's a moderation issue, isn't it?
Like everything,
And so... I remember, again, I sound like I'm older than Father Christmas, but I'd be told, switch the television off because you'll get square eyes.
Yeah.
And go out and play with your mates, and you used to do it. So I think that we've all got a huge responsibility here, everything
as
in
parents.
Moderation. For sure, let them explore, but come on, let them go out and play, socialise, learn life skills. Yeah.
So you don't disallow them having those devices, but you put a time limit on, that is a crucial thing.
Yes, that is different to safeguarding. This question really is about how do we keep our children safe online.
Yeah.
Managing their screen time you could argue is a separate thing. Because if I said to you, which is safer, the boy that's on his device 12 hours a day watching clips of football, or the girl that's on just 2 minutes a day talking to a predator or whatever it may well be.
That's far more dangerous.
Of course it is. We know that there is a correlation between time spent online and risk. But fundamentally, when the likes of Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health, says this is all about screen time management, no, it's not. Not the safeguarding question, isn't it? The safeguarding question is, what is your child seeing? Who are they talking to? What are they listening to? And how can we better manage that? How can we use technology to stifle what has become a technology issue? Bullying has been happening since Adam and Eve. That's a primal issue, but social networks have amplified it because bullying used to stop at 3:30 at the school gates, Monday to Friday. Now it's 24.
24, so it can be, of course.
Yeah.
Lots of people have been asking me about, weirdly, something I hadn't thought about, but rap. We listen to a lot of music in our household, and some of the stuff that we listen to, I'm like, gosh, turn that off. But this is one thing lots of our readers are saying, their young boys in particular are listening to this hardcore rap, and mothers are worried about that. Is there anything, I suppose there's nothing your technology can do for that, but then different scenarios, whether it be gaming in their bedroom or whatever it is, how do you tackle the different issues?
Sure, so the common theme of those two is audio. And actually we are developing technology now that can filter inappropriate language, harmful content. So be very wary, mums and dads, that your boy's upstairs in his room on Fortnite, he can talk to people he's never met.
Of course.
And we know, and we're looking for predatory behavioural patterns. We know that predators ask questions like, are you alone in your house? Now our software is being taught now to look out for those signs, and then we can disable the gaming device.
And does your app work on gamings, or is it purely on tablets?
At the moment it's purely on phones and tablets, iOS and Android.
Does that include iPad?
Yes.
Well? Yeah.
Does,
okay, fantastic. So that's your next stage to tackle things like gaming, because it's a big worry.
Yeah, it's a huge worry, because that's where kids are going. I used to go and climb trees and fall out and graze my knee. Now you graze your knee by being online and getting into trouble online.
Yeah. And tell me, how simple is it to use? How do you go about setting up SafeToNet?
Well, so I would argue it's very simple to use, but of course I'm so buried into it now, maybe it's not. But simply, you install the keyboard just by downloading the app onto the child's device. Now, intriguingly, a question we often get asked is, but what if the child deletes it? Well, the answer is we let them. They can. But what mum and dad see is something totally different. So whilst the child is typing away and the keyboard may glow red and it will filter their messages, what you see as a mum is something totally different. You see a safety score, a dynamic safety score. So you see a direction of travel, it's an arrow, of your child moving towards risk or away for risk. And then what we do is we advise and guide you on the sorts of things you need to know to go and have a conversation with your son and daughter, because that old maxim, never enter a battle of wits unarmed. Well, if you go and have a discussion with your child about their online world, I can tell they know more than you do, they know instantly they know more than you do, and they're quite clever, and so they'll run rings around you. I mean, I can tell you, for example, that if you look at an average teenage boy's phone and look at the apps, you'll see, for example, a calculator. You say, well, that's no big deal. He's got a calculator. Well, often these calculators are not what you think they are. They're apps that hide images that have been stored on that device. So our software also analyses the device and looks for inappropriate images.
And I was hearing from also another young adult the other day about this ghosting the history. So obviously parents think, oh, I know exactly what my kids have been looking at, I'll just look in their history browser. But they're now all on the playground talking about ghosting their history, clearing it off.
Well, you see, kids share their tricks and their tips with each other, don't they, naturally? I mean, I seem to remember doing that on a different sort of world.
Do you remember the old phone boxes as well? I was at boarding school and you could like tap, 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 and you could get through a way of getting a free call.
Shame on you. I simply don't remember that at all.
I was one of these nightmare children who would have been
exactly that. We all learned that tap, 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 tap thing. And reverse charge calls to another telephone box.
Yeah.
I ought to stop what I'm saying here. But the point is, kids know how to get around this stuff, and they share these tips. So our job, we think, is as much to inform and guide and advise the parent on this strange, unknown online world as it is to steer the child away from trouble in the first place.
So tell me, if I'm looking at the app and it's saying to me as the parent, oh my goodness, your child's going head first into danger, I'm going to start freaking out and go, what can I do? What have you been looking at? How do you stop that and be that helicopter parent that's stressing your children out that they have no privacy and not be shocked and worried that they're doing something really dangerous?
That is such a good question, because that goes to the heart of the privacy rights of your child. So I'm going to answer that in two ways and just remind ourselves why it's important to maintain the privacy or the child's privacy rights. And that is because if we don't do that, they will go underground, they will try and defeat it and avoid it and so on. And the point is to try and get a meaningful dialogue between you and your kids. So the privacy right is important. So we don't actually tell you that your child is as right slap bang hit a brick wall of risk, but you see a strong indication through this risk dial, this safety score. And then we send you advice and guidance on the sorts of matters that we think you might want to talk to your child about.
Okay.
And then it says, and now stand back and watch a bit, see if the safety score changes, because if the child was listening, if your child was listening and adapted, then you'll see it. And so that does then go back to that point where you do need to talk to your kids about this, but only talk to them when you really know what it is
that you need to discuss.
You need to discuss, yeah. So we get the whole point. If I was to, you can imagine the legal minefield we're in as a company here, and so we've had stunning advice from incredibly expensive lawyers, I can tell you this. But if I was to tell you, which we don't, that your son is being bullied right now, you will want to know naturally by who is it.
Yeah.
And if I told you that, you might have a baseball bat in your cupboard and go around and sort it out. So that won't help. So what we look for through is artificial intelligence. We're looking at the emotional state of your child. So we can pick up 13 different emotional states, from anxiety to stress to fear. Fear is a classic one, especially when it comes to bullying. We can tell you statistically that our software can pick up that around about 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, kids whose fear levels increase are beginning to realise they're back at school the next morning. That's a strong indicator, not a determined, not an absolute factual one, but a classic indicator that there's bullying going on. And we look for other signs too. Have they gone quiet and so on? So then what the software does is it advises you to just watch your child from a distance a bit. Do they jump when their phone bleeps and all these sorts of things? Because there's a chance that was an unpleasant
Do you need
message.
your eyes open?
You do, yeah. So this is all about guiding you where to look and how to deal with it as it is steering the child from trouble.
You talk about this keyboard that glows when they're, so for instance, if your child says, take off your top or whatever, it would probably do that. But what happens when if someone else was saying that, for instance, to your daughter, why don't you take off your top? Would you be able to pick that up when it pings through?
We're not allowed to by law. I go to prison for that. That's the Snooper's Charter. That's what's called an interception of an incoming message. We're not allowed
So you can't intercept, but you can jump on things that your child is writing about.
To give you an example of how the software works, we're looking at the changes in behavioural pattern of our own children. So as we're talking naturally now, nice and friendly, if I started raising my voice, if I was abusive, if I started being aggressive to you, the one thing I can tell you for certain that will happen is you'll change your behavioural pattern to me. You'll punch me on the nose, you'll tell me to get out.
My voice will raise.
Whatever it may
well
be.
I'll get worried and frightened.
Yes. And so we've taught our algorithms to look at how the child that's being predated upon, if that's the right word, how their behaviour pattern changes when an incoming message comes in that upsets them.
Fascinating. And tell me a little bit about your two, you've got two plans, Essential and Pro. What would be the difference there?
So the Essential is sort of the start of the safeguarding journey. It's where we're just getting you used to the whole concept of detecting risk. So we actually, internally, we call these detection and protection as opposed to the Essentials and Pro. There's a commercial reason why we've had to call them the other.
Sure.
But essentially, the entry-level product is all about detecting risk and just letting you know the stuff going on.
What sort of age would you say that's perfect for?
Well, we're aiming this really at sort of 8 to 12, 13-year-olds.
It's quite young if you think about it, but I guess, yeah.
It is very young because kids just go on, give me your phone. And of course, classically, 8, 9, they're getting a hand-me-down from mum or dad. They might not be getting the latest and greatest. But come the age of 11 or 10 to 11, in fact, it's getting earlier and earlier and earlier. They're being given their own super smartphone. Yeah.
One thing, I don't think this is really relevant to lots of people, but Ipods, my son uses one for story tapes and things at night, which are obviously always on the internet as well. You can hide it, but he can find it, or I'm sure under restrictions you can take it off.
Yes.
But do you work with that as well, or do you just say just take it offline?
We're more interested in where the child is socially interacting. That's where the real risk is. We can filter harmful websites as well. That's quite old hat technology, quite frankly. But we're more interested in what the child is saying and when they're saying it. Absolutely. So times of day. See, argument, just going back to how we detect changes in behavioural pattern. If you and I had an argument, you won't let me sit here and ramble on for 30 minutes, wait till I finish my point before you join in. You will jab, we'll be doing this. So our messages get shorter and they get quicker. That's really easy to detect. You're going to ask yourself again, well, then why isn't Facebook? And we go back to that same old thing. So those patterns of behaviour, sexting is often, again, it's very frothy. It's bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, bang. You show me yours, and then a picture. So these patterns are relatively easy to detect.
To pick up. You said that you're more interested in that. Something I'm really interested in at the moment, I don't know if you can help me with, is I am really interested in security settings for online, so on your web browser. And I can't understand it, because lots of the companies say, okay, we'll download this app and then you need to input the 10, 20, 30 sites that you're happy for them to look at. But is that really realistic?
No, it's not, because I can tell you that we have a database of over 50 million undesirable websites. 50 million. How are you haven't got a snowflake's chance of ever getting the right ones. No. So what we do, and I've got to say, perfection we're not so sure is really possible at the moment, but we're getting there. You know, our software isn't perfect. But what we do is we age categorize. So you could say, well, I've got a 10-year-old, so I'm going to press this button and it will wipe all of these websites out.
Yeah, but again, so you guys do that?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so again, that should be a simple thing. When you buy an iPhone or whatever phone you've got, you should just say, or if you've only got one computer for the whole house, sure, it should have users with the age. And they all bang on about being able to have this, but it's not. It's impossible to set these. They say you either, with restrictions, you're either online or you're offline. They don't say, like when you were a kid and you went to the cinema, if you went to an 18 and you were 12, you would have no hope in hell of getting in.
It's fundamentally flawed, isn't it? It is. But I'm also going to just levy a challenge at everybody that's watching this. How many of you who've got an 11 or 12-year-old are allowing your son or daughter to use Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat?
Quite a lot of them.
Quite a lot, and we know that because we can see it. The problem is that means somebody somewhere has to fabricate a date of birth. Now, when kids do it themselves, they don't say, oh, I'm 13 and one day. They say they're 17 or 18. And what happens then? Well, then the algorithms feed them adverts that are totally inappropriate. Dating app sites, gambling and so on.
You don't even think about that, do you?
No, but that's what happens. And, you know, we know the tragedy in the news recently of Molly Russell, who killed herself, where the algorithms were feeding her more and more self-harm content. It's just so fundamentally flawed.
Corrupt and wrong.
Yeah,
it's just terrible.
And so We're trying to make a difference. So we only exist to keep children safe online. It's the only reason why we exist.
And how easy is it to bypass your technology as a child?
Really easy, because we let them do it.
So they do
but
it.
you as a mum would know they've done it, which
Fantastic.
again, we then guide you to go and have the discussion.
So it's that trust that you have with your child. So it goes hand in hand with that chat.
So you know they've done it.
Yeah.
It's down to you to then have a good discussion with them and advise them you're only trying to keep them safe. You're not snooping, spying or prying.
Yeah. Fantastic. Because you look at all of the routers and things when you get them into your house and they say, right, you can embed this and that to make sure you can't have porn in your house, etc., etc. You only need to Google how to bypass that as a 13-year-old, and there are 1,000 tutorials showing you how to do that very, very quickly.
And the crucial thing is about that is you don't know they're doing it.
Exactly.
Whereas our software
yours
is telling you.
it's open. This question I think we've really answered. How do they get around the risk of snooping on your children every move? Again, you just need to discuss it with them.
Yes.
And they know how it all works.
Yes.
There are a few other things that I really wanted to go into, like the dark web and things. Your thoughts on that? I don't know if that's for another time or whether you've got time just to...
Well, again, if a child is absolutely determined, they'll get on it. They'll get on it. In our world, the safety score that you're looking at will know something is going on.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, the child that is determined will
find a way.
Will find it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything like that that's really worrying you, or do we go back to obviously the self-harm and ultimately what could happen is your main worry?
Well, I think bullying is a much, much bigger issue than we really generally realise. And one of the issues that I know exists in society now is that I can remember being at school and I can remember watching boys being bullied and so on. But I know those guys now, and they're fine.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've even had one man say to me, "Oh, come on, you've got to let them grow up, let them take the pain of being bullied." Well, I can tell you that bullying online is nothing like how it used to be in the playground.
Not face to face.
No, they create fake accounts of your child, and then your that fake account starts sending abusive messages to others, and then the child gets in trouble at school
For doing nothing.
For doing nothing, and yet the technology is ruining their lives. And when you consider that suicide rates are higher in children, that higher now than they have ever been, you have to. We've got to get the grips with this thing.
Yeah.
And so we see all kinds of threats. We see the abuse, the aggression, the sextortion, the bullying, and so on. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. There's over 500 million children in the world on social networks right now. And as far as I'm concerned, every one of them is at risk. Until governments wake up and stop saying, well, I'm going to fine Google. Google and Facebook, they clearly have a responsibility in this area, but they're not the only ones.
No, we all play our part, of course.
We all do. So my belief, as a businessman, is that market dynamics can have a huge impact. So if we stop buying phones unless they've got safeguarding software on them, those that provide them will start putting safeguarding software on them.
How do you do that? That is a huge campaign.
It is and it isn't. So the business model of SafeToNet is to sell to those telcos. And in the dream ticket, the perfect scenario for me is that you'll be given SafeToNet for free.
Yeah.
Because
it should be.
It's a basic human right to be kept safe. Right?
And you shouldn't be listened to. You buy an iPhone, and if you download Instagram, you're listened to on a microphone.
I know. And so,
how can that be a default setting?
So, I for those that might have ever heard me say this before, I apologise. But let's just consider the world that we live in. Okay. If you want to go and buy a bag of nuts, on the side of the bag of nuts, there's a warning that bag contains nuts. If you want to go and buy some tablets that help you sleep, there's a warning on the side that says these tablets might make you drowsy. Yeah. You go and buy a phone, an iPhone, or a Samsung, whatever it may well be, there is no warning on it anywhere. When you go and register your details on a social network or a chat room, there is no warning anywhere. It might say, please confirm you're 13 or 18. Yeah. Well, come on, let's get real.
And if you look very, very closely in the terms and conditions, it says, if you get cancer using your phone or...
Yeah, and anyway, who reads terms and conditions? None of us,
Conditions, a
because we
tiny
live
bit at
in
the
an
bottom.
instant society. We want the instant fix. So the world has gone mad, and it's about time that everybody stopped talking about it, and all these charities which get their role, who say, "Oh, just sit down and talk with your child." No, that's going to get you nowhere. You've got to use software. I don't care, quite frankly, whether it's mine or somebody else's.
Or whether it comes free with the device,
I actually
which it should.
I want it to come free, because it's not right, is it, that maybe you and I can afford to keep our children safe online, but the chap down the road can't.
Absolutely,
That's
it's
wrong.
not, totally.
Yeah. So it should be given away for free. It should be mandatory. It should be a basic human right. The telcos, the social networks, the governments, us as parents, we've all got a role to play.
Sure. Now, the last question I had, I found this company called RM Education, and they do protection sort of devices, blankets and things as they were for different schools. And it says here, this was the first thing I saw, and I was like, oh, that sounds brilliant. It says all electronic devices brought into school, such as laptops, mobiles and tablets that use the school internet connection or guest Wi-Fi, will automatically be subject to the internet controls you've set, i.e. they won't be able to watch porn or whatever. Fantastic. Spoke to boarding schools, they said the same thing. They turn off the Wi-Fi at night. My question that I've spoken to 30 companies this week. My question is, does 4G bypass this?
Totally, 100%.
Why
And
did I have the
4G
feeling you're going
is
to say
invariably faster than the Wi-Fi network. Last week I was in Barcelona at the oil barons ball of the telco industry. It's called the Mobile World Congress, where there's the 800 telcos around the world all congregate to one place.
Yeah.
And what are they talking about? They're talking about 5G. 5G, when you see it, is that quick.
Instant.
Darn sight quicker than your school Wi-Fi. So do we think kids have worked that one out? Of course they have. Good thing about SafeToNet is it works on Wi-Fi and 4G, 5G.
Fantastic.
Or 5G when it comes out.
Yeah. When is that?
Well, who knows?
Long time?
Some said this year, some said in 4 years' time.
Yeah, because it's it's a huge jump,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is. And I think fundamentally the telcos haven't got their money back on the investment they made on 4G yet.
Yeah.
But
Time will
the point
tell.
being is as great as those control mechanisms are that RM has got in schools, if the child's got a phone on them and it's got a SIM card in it, then they can bypass everything.
Well, on that note, Richard, thank you very much for coming to
You're
see
welcome.
us. Please check out this app. We'll put in the show notes all of the information there, and I hope you found this interesting.